Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the deaths of dozens of children in Gambia from suspected fatally contaminated medicinal syrups sees Indian authorities shut down production at a pharmaceuticals company in Delhi, where serious violations were found. Also, the WHO hopes to start clinical trials for the strain of Ebola behind a deadly outbreak in Uganda. At least 19 people have died, and dozens of cases have been confirmed from across 5 districts. And known as microbes, violent child gangs in Ivory Coast live on the fringes of society. But some are also victims, children of turbulent aspects of the country's last few decades. We meet one community worker trying to offer the lost kids compassion and support. But first, authorities in India have halted all production at a factory run in Delhi by Maiden Pharmaceuticals. Now, it's the company behind the cough syrups thought to have caused the deaths of nearly 70 children in Gambia. An inspection of the factory found at least 12 violations of good practice. Last week, the WHO asked regulators to remove Maiden Pharma goods from the market and conducted a lab analysis which revealed unacceptable levels of toxic contaminants in the products. The chemicals, diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol, can lead to the acute kidney problems thought to be behind the deaths in the Gambia. For more, we're joined by Sam Bradpiece, our regional correspondent, speaking to us from Dakar.
The closure of this factory obviously comes far too late to save the lives of the dozens of Gambian children who died after drinking this cough syrup, but it will perhaps go some way towards ensuring damage limitation in the future. Maiden Pharmaceuticals says that it has a capacity to produce 2.2 million syrups every year and that it exports to markets across Africa, Asia and Latin America. The Gambia, though, is said to have been the only country to which exports of what turned out to be deadly cough syrup were officially authorised. But the World Health Organization fears that these products may still be in circulation elsewhere on the informal market. Now, the factory inspection, which revealed poor practices at the Maiden Pharma factory, was by no means unprecedented. In 2022 alone, the company failed 4 safety checks on its products. It was subject to legal proceedings in 2018 from India's national drug regulator, and in 2011 it was even blacklisted by one Indian state. The Gambian president, Adama Barrow, has said that he wants to do everything he can to avoid such a drama repeating itself in his country. He said that this will be done through enhancing checks on imported medicine and notably with the creation of a new national laboratory to perform quality control on those imported medicines.
Uganda's president has spoken to the nation about a recent rash of cases of Ebola in the country that has caused dozens of deaths. The World Health Organization believes that the deadly disease has killed at least 19 people across 5 districts, and the race is on to stop its spread. The WHO hopes to start clinical trials for vaccines for the particular strain of Ebola circulating in Uganda. Our Clement Di Roma tells us more.
The 4 million inhabitants of the Ugandan capital, Kampala, are now worried about the first case and the first death caused by Ebola in the city, confirmed earlier this week. In a televised address this evening, President Museveni claims that this patient fled his village, concealed his identity and visited a traditional healer in another area before finally landing at this hospital in Kampala. The president warned the population and explained that healers should stop receiving patients during an epidemic. Yoweri Museveni also called on medical staff and authorities to arrest patients who refuse isolation and attempt to flee. This Wednesday, an emergency meeting with the Ministries of Health of the neighboring countries was held in the Ugandan capital. The representatives have pledged to communicate promptly with each other and to take strict border control measures to prevent the spread of the virus. The government has announced the arrival next week of nearly 500 vaccines in development. According to WHO, clinical trials could begin in Uganda within weeks.
A former top opposition figure has been named as Chad's new prime minister, as the country's transitional leader moves forward with plans for a political transition towards democracy. Saleh Kebzado had been named as the country's new premier just days after Mohamed Idris Deby took over as interim president. Caroline Lamboulé tells us more.
Once an opponent of longtime Chadian ruler Idris Deby, Saleh Kebzado was named prime minister on Wednesday. A former journalist, he leads the National Union for Development and Renewal. The four-time presidential candidate was once known for his straight talk and attacks on the then president.
We're in sync with our people, and I think that there's no fear. If you look at the elections between 1996 and 2011, each time Deby performs badly. I think that this time is the last time. Next time, he won't be elected at all.
Idris Deby was killed during an operation against rebels in April 2021. After his death, his son Mohamed took over, and a new page was opened with Kebzado. He was named vice president of a committee tasked with organizing a national inclusive dialogue forum. It has been boycotted by a wide range of opposition figures and armed groups. But as the 18-month deadline for transition loomed, the forum announced a 2-year extension earlier this month, delaying elections and dismaying some opposition forces. On Monday, Deby was sworn in once again, vowing to name a national union government within days. Kebzado on Wednesday promised to accompany the president in a great endeavor and steer the country through its transition.
Nigeria says that at least 500 people have died in the country's worst flooding in a decade. Heavy rains this year and poor infrastructure have left many communities particularly vulnerable. Ministers reckon that over 1.4 million people have been displaced and tens of thousands of homes have been damaged. The destruction of farmland as well could worsen food insecurity and boost inflation. More heavy rains are expected over the coming months. One of the legacies of instability and unrest in Ivory Coast during the 2000s is the number of child gangs on Abidjan's streets. Many are orphaned or homeless or both, and they're often implicated in violent crime. They're known locally as microbes. But rather than double down on the stigma that the children face, one youth worker is trying to help the lost kids find their way back to a healthier life. Our correspondent sent us this report.
She says she's a mother to every homeless and excluded child. For the last 10 years, Masanje Cisse has been taking care of minors left to fend for themselves on the streets of Abidjan. The most violent are known locally as microbes of society, but for Masanje Cisse, they're vulnerable children in need of care.
I don't like the name microbe. That's why I'm fighting to stop calling them that. They are human beings. These children left school when they were 13 or 14. They hang around outside. If we help them, tomorrow they can become someone.
Masanje welcomes about 15 children into her small living room. She has set up an NGO to support them, but says she needs more funding from authorities to keep on going.
Now I'd like to have a place to welcome all these children. I support so many children, but I have no place to welcome them. I want to work, but I need the infrastructure.
She's a local celebrity in the Abidjan neighborhood of Abobo. It has the highest crime rate and is where her work is most desperately needed. Masanje tries to address the root causes of antisocial behavior and has created several youth rehabilitation courses. One of her most popular programs is for sewing.
It's been 4 years now since I met Maman Cisse. I was in trouble on the streets and I didn't know what to do. Now I live properly as a responsible man. I take care of my family a bit.
Thanks to Masanje Cisse, about 30 former street children are now designers, hairdressers and domestic workers. Opportunities for stable environments and incomes go a long way in giving the disenfranchised youth, still suffering the fallout of years of political unrest, a dignified place in Ivorian society.
That report by Sadia Manjo and Sophie Lamotte. Now, Benin's nomads can struggle to gain access to formal education systems which aren't adapted to the wandering that plays a big part of their traditional way of life. However, some education workers are now trying to encourage nomadic farmers to put down roots and make the most of the services that can be available in more fixed communities. Our team reports from the village of Guraputel, about 15 hours north of Cotonou.
Here, in Goropotal, located on the edge of northwestern Benin on the border of Togo, this brand new camp is home to nearly 3,000 Fulani families. The local authorities relocated them here, far from the farmers' fields, after deadly land clashes erupted between herders and farmers in the Kobli region in 2018. By making hundreds of hectares of grazing land available, it has resulted in the settlement of families and in turn has encouraged literacy.
School's very important, more so than we thought. I understood that if our children have degrees, they can improve their lives. If I'd gone to school earlier, I wouldn't have been in conflict with the farmers. When you go to school, it helps you understand the laws better, you respect others, and others respect you.
The school was set up by a local NGO. Unlike schools in other Fulani camps, it adapted its program to the realities of the Fulani people. The classes are given in the local language.
They will help their mothers do maths because their mothers did not have the chance to go to school. They'll help them with the sale of their cheese, their poultry or their milk.
Providing access to education is becoming a pressing issue at a time when uncultivated land is becoming scarce and the population is expanding.
We can't continue on this path. Lest everyone continue to raise livestock with many animals, it will continue to cause damage, it will continue conflicts. That's what we're working against.
For the moment, only 30% of the children in the camp attend school. The teacher is paid with contributions made by the parents.
I am proud of my daughter Awa because she can tell me what's on the phone. She dials the numbers, she reads the messages.
A more sedentary lifestyle of herders for social and economic integration is far from being won. In northern Benin, the NGOs supporting these communities have considerably reduced, if not stopped, their activities, such as training in fodder cultivation, due to the rise of violent extremism.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care. Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches, bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité. From North America to the southern tip of Patagonia, join us for a look at the latest political, economic, cultural and social news from the Americas.
Inside the Americas. Presented by Jeannie Godula on France 24 and France24.com.